Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. With more than 30 weekly podcasts, Heritage Radio Network has something for every food lover. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
Support comes from the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit, November 14th and 15th, convening hemp industry stakeholders to learn, connect, and grow. Details at pahempsummit.com.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Sam Coturri. We'll talk to Sam about Winery 16600, talk about his dad Phil a little, podcasting, there's something going on there, and more. We'll taste one of Sam's Syrahs for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Sam Coturri is a fourth-generation wine guy hailing from Sonoma royalty dating back to the 60s. His dad, Phil, started a farming company in the late 70s, practicing thoughtful and organic farming from the get-go, and continues to be one of the most sought-after vineyard minds in wine. Sam worked in public relations, political campaigns, and cannabis before joining Winery 16600, the family winery, as proprietor in 2011. The winery focuses on single vineyard wines and Rhone varietals in the Moon Mountain district in Sonoma. 16600 is the closest thing to wine as the Grateful Dead is to music. Sam Coturri, as I mentioned, is also a fellow podcaster. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Sam.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Sam.
All right, so we're talking to Sam in New York City at his imported distributor, Field Blend Selections. Thank you to Jake for that. All right, so let's get right into it. So you grew up around a pretty colorful and, I would say, influential wine family. I want you to tell me a little about your journey. And I mentioned, PR and campaigns and cannabis and all that. I also mentioned your dad. I want you to tell me about your journey in life and wine that really got you to the table here talking about 16600. So where do we start?
We actually had a podcast guest on our show we do out of Sonoma a few weeks ago. Musician named G Love, and
one of my favorites.
Yeah. It was a well-received show, and we were talking about my family history just a little bit, and he had the greatest thing. He said that my life has been drenched in wine, and hadn't really. It seems sort of self-evident now, but growing up in Sonoma in the 80s and 90s, it was. Maybe I just didn't realize. I don't know if it was such a thing that it has become. So there was wine everywhere
during the time,
right? I was in the vineyards my whole life, making wine at my uncle's Coturri winery, but it was not. I mean, as you said in my bio, it was not like the direction in life that I ever thought I would be going. And what I came to find out when I came back to the family, to the business, that this is actually what I had been doing the whole time. I was, junior.
Was that always, you didn't realize it, or you always knew you'd come back, or nothing was clear, right?
No,
Because you even left the state to go to college.
Right, I went to Nevada for
you
college.
You didn't do the Davis thing or any of the other.
No.
You went to Nevada.
I was definitely not a good enough student to go to Davis.
Okay.
Maybe I could have.
I would have thought somebody had a little pull, but I guess
no,
not that much.
Not
pull.
That much pull. You can't pull those grades that hard. I went to Nevada. I was a ski bum. I was, going to be a journalist. I realized quickly that it wasn't going to be journalism. It was going to be the PR side and politics, and worked on some, statewide campaigns.
Why was that? Did you see journalism more as writing, or a little more thought and effort, where PR is more razzle dazzle?
I think I had a better time making the news than telling the news.
Okay. That's the answer.
Yeah, no, I think I was, the creating side of it, as opposed to the sort of retelling side of it. I was a PR, I was a poli-sci guy, so I saw that connection there. Started working. Worked for Jimmy Carter's son for a campaign. He ran for Senate in Nevada. I got to hang out with the Carters.
So you stayed in Nevada?
I stayed in Nevada.
Okay.
I worked for and then after the campaigns, I worked for a now national PR agency, but started in Nevada. The What Happens Here Stays Here, Las Vegas ad guys, and I worked. I was the bottom of the totem pole in Carson City, hustling for these guys. But I'd go to dinner, with legislators and CEOs and king-making lobbyists, and they'd hand me the wine list. And I didn't really like it. I was like, oh yeah, I know wine. I can order the wine.
Did they hand it because they knew a little about the background, or?
I mean, I must have said something at some point, but
maybe somebody Googled it, or
somebody, and they would, I would be the guy ordering the wine. So it was sort of when I got back that I realized I was always a wine guy,
right?
Whether or not that was really what I thought I was pursuing in life.
So how long were you doing the PR and campaign stuff?
It felt like forever, but it was really 2005 to 2009.
Okay, so I mean, you got
4 years, 5 years.
More than dipping your toe.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if chronologically one runs into the other, but the cannabis thing is intriguing to me because I do a lot of research, but I didn't really dig into what you were doing. But the way I look at it is you were kind of around it fairly early on. I mean, it's more than a thing now. Then it was. Yeah. So tell me what you were doing.
Well, that was the other product that I grew up around. So
Well,
it was very natural in my life.
Yeah.
But after I got laid off from the agency in the 08-09 recession, I found a job with some friends who it was essentially a medical cannabis startup in Oakland, and we had this big grow facility we were trying to get permitted, and I was the public affairs and PR guy. I would wrote big chunks of our application and would speak before the Oakland City Council.
So you, to this day, you know this business.
Yeah.
Now, in those days, it was just medicinal.
It was just medicinal.
Right.
2010 was when I started, and that was the first. It was Prop 19. It was the first time that California tried to legalize recreational adult
How
use.
long did it take? I forgot.
That failed.
Right, not that long ago.
So
right?
it didn't. That was 2010, and I think maybe in 12 or 16 was when 16 was really when
I think it was 16.
Yeah, when
I
it
don't
really
think it was 12.
Yeah, it was 16. So that was another 6 years, and for sure, all of our investment dried up when Prop 19 failed in 2010, and that was essentially what
So
brought
that
me back
was
home.
close to walking into the winery.
Yeah.
2010, 2011, which is,
Right.
I think, when you went. But tell me a couple things about the journey. So you alluded to it. I know it. You kind of grew up in a hippie wine family. I mean, your mom, portrayed by your dad, was like this Jersey hippie.
I'm sure that there's a bottle up here. Yeah, from the Rossi Ranch. My parents met picking grapes in 1977 because my mom had just left a commune and needed a job. My dad grew up in San Francisco in in the 60s. My grandparents thought that they could keep my dad and my uncle out of trouble by taking them out, out of the city and up to the country in Sonoma and putting them to work in the vineyard. Failed miserably in the keeping them out of trouble part of the equation, but definitely kind of brought the family heritage back to the vineyards.
So if you and I got out of a car and pulled up and your mom and dad were there, would I still sense that, their sensibilities? Like I'm not that much younger than them. I'd say, whoa, I mean, these guys remind me of growing up. I mean, your mom still carry all that and everything? She an old hippie?
They're both old hippies,
okay.
For sure. Yeah, my dad taught me how to shave, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Bald beard with the ponytail kind of guy he is now.
Right.
But let's put it this way. When I was working as essentially a lobbyist, my parents saw me in my blue suit and my red tie and my little paid lobbyist badge.
Man.
And they go, where did we fail? How did we fail you? Every other parent would have been like, oh, wow, this kid's got a job.
So good segue to this question. So because of that, what drew you to the industry? Was it just that what was going on in front of you in Nevada? I mean, it doesn't sound like you plotted that career.
No, I think that in my time away from Sonoma, the industry grew, and it's really, in a lot of ways, but and a lot of what it grew towards was the hospitality experience, the fancy building, the caviar and champagne, the winemaker, the barrel, and people stopped talking about the vineyard. And what brought me back was...
Which is really what your dad is all about.
Yeah, this was a way, what I see 16600 as is our way of shifting that focus back to the part of it that really matters, which is where the grapes were grown, how it was grown, and who grew them. All the rest of it is great, but if you don't have that part, none of the rest of it matters.
I agree, and one of the reasons I wanted to sit with you is, you walk the walk, talk the talk. Been doing it before it was, cool or hip or whatever. And in a good way, it's a big topic now. People are writing books on regenerative farming, and guys like Raj Parr are falling off the map and going into this regenerative farming, thing, which is, all nice and everything. Couple last things. What do you think of the cannabis industry now? I mean, does it seem like a missed opportunity? Are you happy it's where it's at? It's here, but it's not what it should be. Give me some thoughts.
My feelings about the cannabis industry are a lot like my feelings about the wine industry.
Well, there's parallels too.
There's all these parallels, and all the hype is about THC levels and how many crops a year you got, and the things that I enjoy in that world are grown in real soil under the sun, and you can have two strains from two different farms on the opposite side of the mountain, and let's talk about why they taste different, why they smell different,
you're
why
more
they.
Of a purist.
I'm definitely, I know how to roll joints. I don't have a vape, those things. But the cannabis industry definitely isn't at a place yet where we can talk about it in terms of terroir and farming. It's still evolving out of this prohibition where nobody wanted to talk about. Where
that's a great point. I mean, right? I get it because I do this and you do it, and we're around it. I think a lot of people don't give a crap, but I think a lot do, because a lot of people have gone organic food, organic wine, natural wine, and they'll realize that that's important. Will it get there?
I believe,
maybe.
I believe it'll get there. I mean, I believe if we keep talking about it and supporting small farmers and caring about our food and our wine, caring about where our cannabis comes from is a natural.
I agree. I mean,
you can only hope, right?
Right. Chances are the guy getting high is organic, and if they're drinking wine, they're drinking natural wine, and care about climate change and all that. So let's hope they're right about that.
But there's also still people who buy wine at the drugstore or the liquor supermarket and buy their cannabis because it's got a shiny package at the dispensary, and that's okay.
Who knows better than you as a PR and a marketing guy? I mean, I think you've become grounded where you understand what goes into everything. I think a lot of it is just like when you make wine for $12, it looks the same, it tastes the same, doesn't matter about the vintage or whatever.
Right.
Which is kind of cool. All right, so let's move on a little.
Okay.
That's good background.
You got lots of questions there. So
That's good
you did-
background.
you did.
Yeah. All right. So one thing I couldn't figure out is 16600
Yeah.
came around, what was it, 2007-ish?
First legal vintage was 2007. My dad had gotten bonded. It essentially sort of grew out of the separation of Enterprise Vineyards, which is my dad's company, and Coturri Winery, which is my uncle's winery. And my cousin was coming into it at that time. So my dad had grapes that had been going to Tony. He stopped sending them to Tony and had to make them somewhere. And then had too much and had to get legal.
So before 16600, there was Coturri.
Yeah.
There was your dad's successful business and all that. So that's sort of what he was doing. Why at that time did it make sense? Like, hey, let's get a name.
Yeah.
Let's put this under one roof. Was it kids? Like the way to get the kids together?
Yeah.
What about terms with your dad and Tony? Okay.
They're, as good as Italian brothers and
okay.
family business can be.
Well, you heard stories of the Mondavis with fist fights. I mean, none of that stuff.
Well,
right?
There was less to fight over than the Mondavis.
Okay. That's a good point.
It's good. We Enterprise Vineyards harvested the Coturri estate for Tony last week.
Oh, okay. So their family is still...
It's really what it was, Coturri Winery didn't necessarily have room for all of us. And so I do think, in his masterfully Italian father manipulative way, that Phil started, making 16600 with the idea of maybe this is a way that we can...
I like where it went.
Get
Two's
back.
better than one. The more the merrier.
And
with the right people, so I mean, it's a good thing. Let's fawn over your dad a little because he deserves a little, recognition.
Just a touch.
From your lens, tell me about his influence on California wine. I always wonder what compels a guy to grow organically or thoughtfully when nobody was doing it. Is that the old, hippie sensibility? I mean, tell me about influence and tell me why.
So, I mean, the Phil, Phil story and sort of the convergence of, he got sent out to the vineyards at 13 to, prune vines for a nickel a vine and that kind of thing. Came up in Sonoma working for this legendary grape grower named Joe Miami, who, definitely not organic, better living through chemistry, 50s and 60s and the whole deal. But every harvest, you'd pick grapes in the morning and Joe would send you out to spread oat seeds, knowing that there's going to be a fall rain that'll help set that seed and keep your topsoil.
So it was like a cover crop.
Well, cover crop before anybody called it.
And not everybody was doing that.
Right. And what Joe did, Joe most famously farmed Monte Rosso with, Mountain Vineyard. And in the mountains, you have to keep all the soil you can. At the same time, somebody, the neighbor in Glen Ellen, gave my dad a crate full of organic gardening journal, Rodale Institute. And he started a compost pile and was, growing vegetables and cannabis and whatever.
He started a compost pile with the magazines?
No, from the magazines. Yeah.
I know, I'm busting.
The magazines probably turned into a compost pile on their own. But he didn't, put those two things together necessarily until the late 70s. And actually the wine that I opened is from the property that he first farmed organically, and
Dos
Limones, and
right.
The landowner there. There was some
Let's
family.
pour that. We'll talk about it more later. But let's start sipping it. What are we doing
a
here?
Family living on the property that didn't want their kids playing in a vineyard where Roundup was being sprayed. And I say this in the tasting room. I say it to people and get the same. You got head nod. 2022. Yeah, don't play in the Roundup. 1979.
But Roundup wasn't that huge then. I mean, it was relatively
It was,
And it was expensive.
Employed. But it was used, and
Right.
it was used for weed control in the vineyards.
Right.
And so that sort of started the journey. The interesting thing about this vineyard site is it neighbors Bob Kennard's vegetable farm, and that was the first vegetables that Alice Waters, organic vegetables, Alice Waters would source for Chez Panisse. So it's a little sort of like nexus of the organic movement up on Sonoma Mountain. And the joke that my dad always says is it took him 40 years to be an overnight success. But there was certainly something that I saw from the time that I left Sonoma and then came back. And I went to high school in Napa, and I would take the bus through Carneros, and
Jeez.
it would be, the ground floor of every vineyard was dirt, sprayed, tilled, the whole thing. And when I came back 8-9 years later, they're still spraying Roundup, but they're growing a cover crop in between. And I was like, oh, that's new. And there was a paradigm shift, in the 2000s, that winemakers, both sides of, the Mayacamas Mountains, Napa and Sonoma, realized that a better way to make better wine is to
So
farm
there
better,
there was
treat
some
the soil
shift. Not everyone bought in.
better. Right.
They weren't. It sounds like they did cover crops, maybe a little more. Why does it take like a Napa so long and parts of Sonoma? Is it just the people, the business? I mean, there's just not people walking around with the sensibility that your dad had.
I mean,
Everyone should be doing it.
Right. It seems self-evident. But first of all, nothing moves quickly in the wine business.
No, obviously.
It's deeply rooted in the way it has been. And the other piece of it is it's while it has this luxury good sort of top end, it's still an agricultural product with really small margins, and people aren't willing to take what they saw as risks. If the chemical salesman said this is how
Napa
this is the way to get
exemplifies
to,
that as much or more than anywhere,
on a daily
just because
basis.
of land value and the cost of doing business. Yeah, I guess. Are you hopeful that things will continue?
The thing that I find the most hope in the wine business is certainly more than ever people are talking about. Climate is obviously
I wanted to get into that.
all those things.
Because nobody knows better than that than your dad.
Right.
And then now that you've been on the ground for a while, you're seeing it. So it's a good. So
Right.
Go.
But the point being, the wine business, because it's this luxury good and has this sort of elevated perception globally, has the opportunity, and in many cases are taking it to lead in regenerative farming and climate conscious decision making in the way that we do. And 25 years ago there was no organic food in Walmart, and now there's organic food in Walmart, right? And maybe it's not
point.
like to the standards of Bob Kennard and Alice Waters in
Well,
the
that's
70s,
a whole
but that's
other
a whole
show,
but it got there, and biodynamic wasn't a thing people talked about until the wine business started adopting biodynamic farming practices and talking about it. And now you go to Whole Foods and there's biodynamic macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, it's
boxes.
crazy.
So if we keep doing that with the stature that the wine business has, pushing these things forward, that's what gives me hope, for sure.
I think you're right. I think the current generation getting younger is more aware and more demanding of that. So I think that's going to naturally push it too. I think the old cult Cali Bordeaux guys, they don't think about it as much, and they're not being pushed out. They're just, there's attrition there, So, so climate change as far as your vineyards and your estate vineyard, is it earlier picking? Is it, what's the obvious major impacts?
It's, mean, it's endemic in the way we think about everything. It's your pruning plan. It's your water use plan. Pick dates have shifted.
So everything has
pushed
changed.
the envelope, but pick dates have shifted. One of the things that talk about, the Colt Bordeaux's of Napa Valley. One of the things that we've done, there's shade cloths, there's these misting systems to lower ambient temperature, but the fruit zone has also risen 6 inches, 12 inches, depending on the.
What does that mean? The fruit zone has risen.
When you train the grapevine, on the trellis
Right.
system, you're trying to have all the fruit that especially when you're talking about like top tier
Right.
Cabernets, you want it to all basically be on the same level.
Right. You kind of train it to do that?
You can train it to do that. And
So you're saying it's getting higher?
So you're moving it up a wire or two to get it away from the reflective heat from the ground.
So you have to
so you're
pivot on
you're,
that.
You're changing the way the vines look.
That's interesting.
To in reaction, and again, you can only do these things so
That's
much
one of
before
many
you have
things.
to like change a lot of other things. But
I mean, I forgot what you call it. The leaves, sort of
Right.
trellis, or
the canopy, and
the canopy.
Yeah, the canopy.
I mean, some
canopy
people
management.
believe in canopy, light, heavy. Some don't. I
Right.
mean, are you forced because of the heat?
You're definitely more aware of it. This was a challenging year in that we actually didn't have a super hot summer, so a lot of people were opening up.
22
their canopies.
vintage.
22 vintage.
Okay.
A lot of people were during our like fairly cool, foggy summer. We're opening up canopy, taking leaves off, and then Labor Day weekend happens and we're 110 degrees for 5
Right.
days straight, and everything got fried. But it is, down to like row alignment and changing the way we're thinking about like, you don't line your rows up parallel to your road or your driveway or, Silverado Trail or something. You are replanting vineyards, 5 degrees off true north to make sure that there's just as much shade and sun on either side of the vine, really like from the ground up.
That's crazy.
rearranging
I didn't
our-
realize that. Yeah, so that's going to continue to evolve.
And then varietals will continue to evolve.
Yeah, I want to talk to you that in a minute, because when we talk about the winery and the wine, I just want to tell everybody we're talking to Sam Coturri. Sam is the proprietor of 16600, a winery in the Moon Mountain AVA in Sonoma. All right, so let's talk about the winery. There's a lot to talk about. Like we said, the varietals, the vineyards, winemaking, philosophy, all that stuff. First, tell me, you alluded to it a little, how and why did 16600 come about? I mean, you kind of mentioned it was time to maybe stop putzing around with Tony or whatever.
I mean, what it came from was my dad really wanting to show off the vineyards that he was farming in a more direct way. And it started with our estate Zinfandel, Moon Mountain District. The address there is 16600.
Right.
So if you want to look it up on Google or go say hi to my parents, you can find it
Easy
that
to
way.
remember.
Easy to remember. And the idea is make single vineyard wines that are about being as specific to a place as an address, and really taking the opportunity that we have to talk about the expression of place and talk about terroir. Things I love to do in the tasting room, and it's harder with in the market because you can't have as many wines out. But to put two different Zinfandels from two different vineyards that are the same vintage, same grower, same winemaker in front of somebody, and it doesn't matter if they have a master somm or it's the first time they've done
Right.
wine tasting. You see those differences, you feel those differences,
Right.
and you have this conversation about place that I thought was so missing in a lot of what the
So that's
Napa
really
wine
the
culture
mission
has done.
statement,
Yeah.
to show off what he's been doing, to get a sense of place. I think you said in wine lies opportunity to express a sense of place.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you're going to say yes, but is Sonoma the right place to make these wines? And why? And maybe now we can get into varietals. Was Rhone a passion, or it's better in that environment?
It's both.
Okay.
I feel extraordinarily lucky to have grown up in Sonoma, which is one of the great places on the planet to grow things, period.
Agree.
People come to Sonoma and they have the worst allergies that they've ever had in their life because everything blooms all year round. Everything grows there. And for sure, there are these little corridors and pockets of the world where grapes grow into fantastic wine. We're lucky to be in one of those places. I always joke, Cabernet put me through college, but the wines that we collect and drink as a family were almost always, if they weren't from California, they were from the Rhone Valley.
So always a love and nod towards the Rhone.
Yeah, exactly.
And an influence.
Right.
So when you have Rhones on the list, that's why.
That's why, but it's also...
the way they make wine. Guys like Jean Gonan and all those guys are farmers.
They're farmers.
Thoughtful.
And the other piece of it is, it was 120 degrees at Oakville Crossroad and Silverado Trail 2 weeks ago, and Cabernet isn't going to be able to last in that climate forever. And we watched these Cabernet vineyards shrivel and dry up in this heat wave, and the Grenache didn't look like it was, sweating at all. And it's of the varieties that we're all exploring, and there's, others on this list that has a ability to withstand a changing and unpredictable climate. So there's definitely that piece of it too. It's like, hey, this is something we can do really well.
I think you're going to see more than a slow roll on change, because you're not going to be able to survive. I mean, Napa may be the outlier because that's their wheelhouse, but if you can't grow it or continues to get hotter, you have fires. All right, so I think we can talk about the wines through the vineyards and all that. So tell me about the vineyards. So let's start with the family has an estate vineyard, and that is where you grow Zinfandel.
Right.
So is that property where you guys live? Is that something that you've had forever? Is that the field you ran through as a kid type thing?
Pretty much. Well, it's the steep rocky terraces that I ran through as a kid and fell down and lost all of our soccer balls and baseballs. The estate property, about 1,000 feet elevation in the Moon Mountain District, was on the way to a vineyard that my dad was developing for a man named Robert Kamen.
The screenwriter, producer, director.
If you're in New York, look for Karate Kid the musical coming soon. Robert sold his first screenplay, bought this piece of property, wanted to, had a wine thing going, but basically was convinced by my dad to develop this property into a vineyard.
So that's kind of a critical statement.
Yeah.
I don't know Kamen. I mean, I know of him, and obviously he's brilliant and smart. I don't know if he's a slickster or not, but a lot of people are in Napa and parts of Sonoma as vanity projects. Right. How did he get to like your dad? I mean, it's the greatest thing that he makes incredible wines and he's this slick guy, and then look who's doing his vineyard man. It's awesome. But how did that?
I mean,
your dad's a better salesperson than anybody thinks. Then,
well, this story has showed up in enough major publications that I don't feel bad saying it into a microphone on recording. He sold his first screenplay, came to Sonoma to visit with a friend. Friend takes him on a hike, and they get to the top of the mountain, and they eat a loaf of Sonoma French bread and some cheese and smoke a joint. And at the end of this experience, Robert says, well, I want to do two things. I want to buy this piece of property, and I want to find the guy who grew that pot, because I want to get some more of it. And, his friend was a real estate agent. He goes, well, good thing is the property is for sale, and we'll go find Coturri. And that's what it came from. They had those, those wine and weed similarities. And my dad had been developing mountain projects with some other people and saw this raw land that Robert had bought and convinced him that he could put an
'Cause
organic vineyard there. Which
I'm
was,
not a
which was
ratings
crazy.
guy, but if
Right.
you look at ratings, Cayman gets, terrific ratings. So the idea of how it's farmed and, Cayman being this sort of Hollywood guy or whatever, that they're making thoughtful wines is really cool.
It's the opus. When Phil wants to convince somebody to hire him to do their vineyard, he takes them to the top of Cayman and says, you can't have this, but we'll get you as close as we can.
Right. So the estate vineyard is only Zinfandel?
Only Zinfandel.
Okay.
Although, Phil's never planted a straight Zinfandel vineyard in his life.
No.
So there's a little Sangiovese,
I
there's
think-
some Merlot, there's some Alicante.
Isn't
there's-
Phil straight oxymoronic?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, totally. Everything's a little tied-eyed and crooked.
So let's leave it at that. All right. Then we mentioned it before, but another prominent vineyard is Dos Limones, which
Yeah.
is very close and dear to the
it's
family
the-
and all of that. Just give me a
heart
little
of it all.
background on that and what you're growing there.
Yeah, so that is on the Sonoma Mountain side of the valley, about 500-600 feet elevation. It's, again, like I said, the first vineyard that my dad farmed organically started in the late 70s. Was replanted at some point to Zinfandel, Sangiovese, and Syrah. So we get a little.
Go backwards a second.
Yeah.
First vineyard planted organically. What was the impetus or input that it went organic? Was it the owner?
It
Was
was-
your dad ready to try something?
It was the owner. It was the owner, and we actually lease our tasting room and office space from the owner's grandchildren, and they've told us very importantly, it was the owner and his wife. It was the wife who said,
Cool.
"Why don't you go and do this? Let him do this. It's going to be more expensive. There's going to be mistakes
And this
made."
is when?
but
Is this 70s?
This is 79.
Yeah.
Everybody thought he was a crazy hippie.
I know.
They were all right. But.
All right, and then there's an interesting vineyard, the Rossi, because a couple things I could note, and you'll expand on them. You're doing some blends from those, and there's an importance to your mom and dad to
Right,
Rossi,
right.
right? So tell me a little about all of that.
So the Rossi Ranch is just above the little hamlet of Kenwood, north end of Sonoma Valley. It was originally planted in 1910 by
Wow.
Val Rossi's father, Carlo. No relation to the jug wine.
Right.
Val, was born that same year. Sometime in the 30s, takes over running the property for his family, and lived there until his death. In the 70s, Val hired my dad, and he was 76, 77, to help, with the vineyard management and run the harvest. And that was the year 77. Then my mom had left the commune, first in Brooklyn, then in Coturri, living on the
She
top.
was in a commune in Brooklyn?
She was in a commune. She grew
Where's
up-
Coturri?
Coturri is it's in between Petaluma and Santa
Okay,
Rosa.
it's California.
it's
I never
California.
heard of it,
They pulled up stakes and moved to California,
Okay.
back to the land like everybody
All
else. And she needed a job, and that time it was sort of like before the migrant labor really started to show up.
Interesting.
And it was like broke hippies that would go out and pick grapes. So my parents met there picking grapes. Dad continued to farm there. I think Coturri Winery made some Rossi wines in the early days, and then after Val died, new family purchased it and brought us back.
Stayed with it?
Stayed with it. Kept the
Great.
name, saved the house, and brought my dad back in to farm it in 2012 or so. So we make
So
3 or 4 different wines from
it
there.
must be a pleasure to continue, emotionally, the
It's-
actual food
yeah.
and everything.
I mean, there's
Special
there's
place.
pictures of me, at 3 years old with my grandmother.
When
shears
you
in
were
my
little,
hands
but then
at
again,
that
maybe you
property.
were never little.
I was always, I've always been 3, no matter what. Let's put it that way.
Right. We'll leave it at that. I know you grow and make wine from a vineyard in Oakville. We talked about Napa and how hot it is.
Right.
It's kind of unusual, and Oakville is like like Park Avenue.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way, it's funny.
This is the Park Avenue in the 80s. It was basically the first Enterprise Vineyards Napa Valley project. It was mostly a redeveloped vineyard. Again, Oakville Ranch.
Which
it had some,
Oakville Ranch is the winery,
Oakville
right?
Ranch is the winery. Yeah. So they
They're
have a
still
wine.
around.
Yeah, they have a wine brand. It is truly like vaunted real estate. You drive past Dalla Valle to get there.
Yeah,
there's a
that
place,
whole area.
There's a place where you can like stand and you look down and spit in the general direction of Screaming Eagle. Yeah, it's like it is everything.
Yeah.
And in the replant, they pulled out this dead block of Chardonnay, and Enterprise Vineyards, Phil and Maya Kamasolds convinced the ownership to let us plant a couple acres of Grenache. So to this day,
Cab and a couple acres of Grenache.
It's mostly Cab. There's some like a field blend, Zinfandel, some Chardonnay, some superb Cabernet Franc, like some of the best Cabernet.
Really? Does anybody bottle just Cabernet Franc, or it's always a blending thing?
It goes into a lot of blends. I was able to secure a couple barrels of 2019 Oakville Ranch Cabernet
stuff,
Franc.
I'm sure.
It's there's 48 cases. It's available to 16,600 members.
Did it come out great? Yeah.
No, it's
That
justifies the price tag. Let's put it that way.
But that's the fun stuff.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about. Doing it right, but all the passion projects and everything.
But the Grenache is the thing I love about the Grenache from Oakville. You sit there and it's this neighborhood. It has the opulence that you'd expect from an Oakville wine, just
Right.
in a Grenache form.
Right.
And it's basically the only Grenache bottled from the Oakville district. Everything else is Oakville Cabernet. Groth and Silver Oak. And
Yeah,
Opus
it's all
One.
that. It
Mondavi.
epitomizes
Right.
what that area is. It's just funny that's there. I'm surprised the Screaming Eagle guys don't yell and don't let that stuff blow this way. We don't want any
what happens? We go to these Oakville tastings and we taste through all these Cabernets, and then I pour the Grenache last, and all the winemakers are like, wait, can I get some of that?
So, clear up something for me. So, Oakville, they're giving you vines to make 16,600, plus is Enterprise managing everything else?
Yeah. I mean, we try and operate 16,600 as a separate entity from Enterprise Vineyards. It doesn't really
No,
work.
I know. I didn't mean to confuse.
But, it was just...
Wait,
it's
to
sort
that
of,
point,
it's sort
does
of modern-
Enterprise manage Oakville's property?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then 16,600 contracts
From Oakville.
two, both.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
And obviously, because you
Right.
know the source and all of that.
And the only grapes that we use for 16,600 have been grown by Enterprise Vineyards.
Right.
So it's all within that universe.
So your partners in these other vineyards, it's not what you demand of them. It's basically you're doing it.
Yeah.
It's not like Joe Schmeckelhead's owned this for 60 years and we tell Joe we want to farm organic. It's you go in there and, do what you have to. There's a couple other things, Steel Plow, Muchas Piedras.
Right.
What's going on there?
Steel Plow is actually on the Valley Floor, one of the few Valley Floor vineyards. Some Grenache and some Viognier there. Surrounds a winery called Landmark Winery in Kenwood. Cool site.
Very well
Bottom
known.
of the bottom of Sugarloaf Mountain. It's got this just crazy gravelly soil. Muchas Piedras is my personal vineyard baby.
A lot of stones?
Yeah, many rocks, a lot of stones.
I didn't say a lot of stones.
Right,
I said
well-
stones.
All the vineyards that we go to are a lot of stone.
Okay.
The Muchas Piedras is neighboring to the 16,600 estate.
Oh, cool.
And the property got bought, and there was a sort of decrepit vineyard there, and we knew that the new owners wanted to make the vineyard productive, and struck a deal to plant this
When
vineyard.
did you go in and start turning everything around?
2014 was the year we planted Muchas
Okay.
Piedras. 16 was the first fruit off
So
of
it should be really coming
It's
into some
starting to
stride
hit
now,
its stride.
right?
I think-
Feeling good.
I think they're going to be picking it sometime while I'm here in New York, and it's making me just a little crazy.
Well, it was your idea
but
to come here.
Well, you come when you can come. And so Muchas Piedras is mostly Grenache, with one long terraced row of Mourvedre and 24 vines of Alicante Boucher.
Is that the right soil to grow Grenache necessarily or not necessarily?
One of the things that I love about Grenache so much, Sam, is that it can grow in a lot of different places and
Okay.
ways.
And it does.
And it does.
There's a diversity of terroirs in the south and in the
all
north.
over the planet, right?
Yeah, right. Spain.
But it can show a sense of place almost, more accessibly than just about any other variety. So,
And
you
that's
put
what
it
you
in a
guys
place
are
where,
about.
right?
Yeah.
So you put it in a place with, warm, just above the fog line, crazy rocks, and it's gonna make this really sort of crunchy, acid-driven, but also ripe expression of Grenache.
I love that word, crunchy.
It's
Starting to become overused, but it's the right
well,
word.
but when it
it's
is,
like this
when
wine
it
is very
happens.
mineral. What are you
Right.
talking about? Crunchy. What are you talking
You
about?
want to feel it on your teeth,
Yeah, that sounds great.
Support comes from the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit. Join us for the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit trade show and reception at the Farm Show Complex in Harrisburg on November 14th and 15th. Connect with industry stakeholders and grow the industry together through our 2023 industry planning sessions, industry and legislature panel discussions, success story sharing, professional development workshops, and a research showcase. Register to attend or get involved by exhibiting or sponsoring. Details at pahempsummit.com.
So, help me describe the winemaking. Is it a collaborative effort? I mean, are there a few
Yeah,
people?
there's a few
It's
people.
not like, Philip Matisse is making all the. Tell me how that works.
It's collaborations with people that we grow grapes for, for their main job winery. Started with a guy named Jeff Baker, who founded Carmenet Winery, and then now is Stone Edge Farm. So we make some wine with Stone Edge Farm and Jeff Baker, and now his successor, Alejandro Ziman. We make some wine with Eric Bradley, who's a bunch of came up from Richard Arrowwood's sort of cellar.
He's got good chops.
Yeah, he's got good
Got
chops.
a low key guy, right?
Super low key guy.
Right.
And then we work with Isabelle Gassier from the Gassier family in
I know
France.
Gassier.
And she helps guide our Rhone production. And then we work with Will Buckland's nephew. They have a custom crush facility, and so Jack helps kind of guide some of our winemaking in their facility as well. So we keep it as complicated
It's
as
an
possible.
interesting,
but
it's not the typical answer. It's kind of cool, kind of fits into the vibe.
We're farmers, we're not winemakers.
Right. Do you and your dad get in there? I
Yeah.
mean, you leave it to the experts, but don't you every now and then, like something's really right or not right?
More often than not, you find that what you're supposed to do in the cellar is, again, it's pretty self-evident. It's the grapes and the fermentation and the wine sort of guide you.
The low intervention term.
Low intervention.
You're bringing in the best fruit from smart farming.
Don't mess it up. Don't stay out of the way.
So
that's,
based on that principle,
right. So we're very involved in every piece of the winemaking, from calling the pick to how it's fermenting, and then obviously blending decisions and barrel decisions and stuff like that.
Right.
On a regular
so very
basis.
much involved.
Very much
right.
involved. Yeah.
Right. Is because of all the different things, different winemakers, different vineyards, different varietals. I mean, I'm hoping the answer is no. I mean, there's not really a style, right? I mean, everything dictate vintage year, the vineyard, everything dictate. You respect that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if there was one style, it's it's always going to change from vintage to vintage and vineyard to vineyard, but we trust the vines that we grow to reach a pinnacle of ripeness without sacrificing freshness and acidity. So there's a lot of people who pick the vineyards that we pick earlier than we do,
Sure.
because they work with a lot of vineyards that they can't trust it to go that far without shutting
Right.
down. And so we are not afraid of the fact that we're in California and in the sun and make wines that are my least favorite question is what's your alcohol level? Because our alcohol
Well, I
levels
didn't
are
ask you that,
higher than.
but what
than
I know
average,
and what I respect and what I realize I like now is, California has a profile. It's warm and you can get terrific fruit there, but it's how you farm it and how you make it. Everything doesn't have to be balls to the wall.
Right.
So I mean that's an important thing, and I love that. Before we do the wine list and we taste wine, we talked about a lot of important things: climate change, proper farming and all that, proper winemaking. Wine is more than just the liquid in the glass. It's a community. Do you look at it that way? I would guess so based on the background, but people and how you treat them and how you compensate them and keeping them around. Is that a common practice? Is it hard
it's for sure it's hard. I think it's becoming more of a common practice. There's a whole lot less. People think of it as migrant farm workers and migrant labor, and that doesn't really exist anymore. We farm about 800 acres for Enterprise Vineyards, which is not a huge number, but it's not a small number.
It's busy,
and there's essentially like 130 to 150 full-time employees.
Wow.
And the base pay is at this point is now in the low 20s for somebody who's coming in and working in a vineyard picking up rocks.
So the answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
You have to.
The things that I'm honestly the most proud of, and I'm gonna try to keep my eyes dry talking about it. These guys who worked for my dad literally my whole life.
Their family.
Their family. This guy, I think of Miguel Santoyo, who was 18 on his paperwork for the first 2 years. Came across the border, and however, got legal, became a citizen, owns a house, has put 3 kids through college. That's like.
And he's still with you guys?
And he's still with us.
How old is he?
He's
50s, 60s?
He's probably in his mid 50s. He was 16.
He's a young guy.
He was 16 when I was born.
Right.
So he's 55, 56.
He's a young guy.
Yeah, he's a young guy.
That's a great story.
And
that was what the question was about.
Yeah, that's
why would he be there if you guys were dicks or whatever,
Don't ask the people that are working for you to go spray something on this crop that you wouldn't want in your own backyard. And if you start with that baseline, there's a sort of inherent respect for humanity.
100%.
That comes from it.
I agree. All right, last topic on the agenda, and I don't want to give you too much time on this, is you've been podcasting for a while.
Yeah.
Not like the last 20 minutes when it's been hot, but you've been doing it. Yeah. And it's a good podcast, and it does pretty well. Yeah. I have our company charts everything, and you see what everyone's doing. A lot of people do this and don't show up, on any of the charts. You guys do. So tell me about the podcast and tell me. It's a bunch of guys.
Kind of grew out of the local public access radio station. But the concept was always there's a grower perspective, which I bring. There's this guy named Bart Hansen who's worked in the
Tell everyone the name.
The Winemakers.
The Winemakers on Radio Misfits.
Radio Misfits podcast network. You can get it on all the
wherever
places.
You get pods.
The same place that you got this podcast, you can find us. When you're done listening to Sam's show, listen to our show.
That's exactly it.
And so we have the grower perspective, the wine perspective, a sommelier, so the sort of sales side of it, and this old Chicago radio guy who represents sort of your average Joe consumer. And it started, we would just bring topics and it would be the 4 of us. And then, a few months in, that was 2017. And then a few months into it, we started bringing in folks to interview. And for the most part, people we interview are not the marquee names, but they're people who have side projects and, work as cellar masters and, small wineries, small farmers.
So you do something similar to what I do. When I started this, and you have a PR background, I have a sales and marketing background, it's like who's the biggest guy I can get, who's the most famous, you know, and that helps bring people in. But today, for me, it's more to the story.
Right.
And the reason you and I are sitting here is obviously everyone who's been listening, there's a very cool story here. And it seems like that's what's important to you.
My favorite thing, you know, it's obviously it's been great for 16600 and people listen and come to the tasting room because of that. But my favorite thing is when, you know, loyal 16600 customers who listen to the podcast, and I see them like post on social media that they're drinking a bottle of wine that was, you know, one of our recent guests, and they went out and they found that bottle and are now, you know, are at a dinner table in North Carolina or Minneapolis or wherever, telling that story to whoever they're having dinner with, and that's just like,
there's more of that going on than you think, because people that choose to listen to your podcast or this have made a decision, and there's an intimate relationship, and they're listening. So the idea that, you know, they're going to try this wine after this or that stuff, it's always going to happen. So it's the Winemakers on Radio Misfits. It's been going on, what sounds like 5 years already?
We are closing in our 250th episode.
Me too.
Yeah.
So it should, you know, how frequent? Weekly, pretty much.
We try and be weekly.
Okay, I mean, I know
And
that
you know, we don't do any editing.
Either do we.
Your 2 pages of notes that you wrote up are 2 more pages that I've ever written. It's pretty
Trust me,
free-flowing.
there's no editing here. I'm not doing anything,
Yeah.
and I didn't get to all of this stuff. All right, so that's the Winemakers on Radio Misfits. After listening to Sam, you can get the perspective that, you know, wine guy, wine family, winemaker, wine grower, and he surrounded himself with some other cool guys. So keep that in mind. All right, Sam, nobody leaves here without doing the wine list. The wine list is 5 questions. We've asked the same 5 questions to everyone for almost 250 podcasts. Nobody escapes it. Be brief. People love hearing what guys like you are drinking. I post everything on social media. You know, we have a whole data bank and all. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? And that is what's in your fridge at home, what's interesting you. You're traveling in New York and D.C. Maybe you have exposure to stuff here that you...
Right.
Tell me some of the things you're drinking right now.
You know, at home, I drink a lot of more white wine than red wine.
Okay. What?
My favorite thing, it started during the you know, the quarantine times. Really good friends of mine in Sonoma. The assistant or associate winemaker for Bedrock, but his personal label, Desire Lines Wines, and he makes fantastic Riesling from different vineyard sites.
I gotta
all over
look for that.
Sonoma. And yeah, I think they get to
So
New York a
the
little
Maker's Desire.
Desire
Who's
Lines.
the guy?
Cody Rasmussen.
Cody Rasmussen.
and Emily.
And
Yeah.
it's a Riesling from the grapes or from where?
The one that I really love is Cole Ranch.
Okay.
Up in you know, the Anderson Valley area.
Well, give me a couple of the things you're drinking.
You know,
that's a good one. That's why I asked you the question.
That's you know, I love northern and southern Rhones. So there's, you know, a lot of Saint Joseph.
Any makers that rise to your top?
You know, I buy wine from this crazy guy in New York, and I know the people who are going to listen to this know him, Lyle Fass, and I don't mind that I call him crazy guy.
Sure.
And so he, you know, gets all these wild small producers, and I'll buy some stuff from him.
So you're open to try stuff you haven't heard of.
You know,
you leave it to Lyle. He's out there pounding.
You know, and I have things that I love and that are my favorites, but you know, there's so much wine out there that I try and keep it fresh.
All right, so give me, so I could post.
Yeah.
Give me one wine and maker that came through with Lyle that you like. Can you remember?
I can't remember any names off the top of my brain. But you know what I'll do is I'll give a shout out to Domaine Gassier. They're in Nîmes, and I, you know,
making
anytime
good
I can
stuff.
find their wine, I'll buy a bottle.
I agree with you
helps
on
us
that.
a lot, and their family, good farming, good winemaking, Coturri, the whole deal.
All right. I'm going to post that stuff. Second question, maybe the goofiest, but I'm pretty sure you'd be happy with this question. Favorite wine and food pairing? Not what you... Good setup, right? Not what you think is good, what you like. And I know it's not something you eat every night, week, month, but when you do it, it's the old ooh-ah, man. This is And there's a Grape Nation rule. You can't say champagne and oysters.
All right, that's fair. I believe in.
I love a guy who closes his eyes to answer a question like that. Go ahead.
I very much want to not deep platform, but kind of bring it down a little bit with the wine and food pairings. And with that, I started an event that we do at the tasting room called Tacos du Rhone, and
love that.
I love an al pastor taco
with
and a glass of Grenache.
Okay. So al pastor, which has got some body.
Yeah, it's got some body. It's got the sweetness. It's got the, it's not super. It's salty, but it's not over the top. You don't want it totally spicy because you want to catch some of those other flavors.
I think that's a great answer. I could tell you two things. Nobody's ever given me that answer before. And the other one is, for some reason, I think you're expert on that answer. Okay, and we'll move along on that. All right. Favorite wine restaurant and/or bar? And I know you travel, and I know COVID kind of hit everyone. Right. Give me stuff up around you, so when people hit that area, coming from you, where's a place the list is cool, the people are great, the vibe is right, they're knowledgeable? Yeah,
there's two places that come to mind immediately. One in Napa, one in Sonoma. In Napa, it's a place called Torc, Torc.
It's a restaurant too, right? Restaurant and great wine list.
Great wine list, great food, great cocktail program. They're in the heart of Napa. They have all those sort of Napa things that you expect. There's also some fun stuff to dig into a little bit from all over the world. That's a good one. And then lately, it's these friends of mine who opened the spot on the plaza called Valley Bar and Bottle.
I've heard about it. I heard it's terrific.
It's terrific.
Who are the people behind it?
So it's Lauren Feldman, Tanner Wally, Emma Lipp, and Steph Rieger. And they all have some New York connections. Tanner worked for, what's the guy with the beard? Terroir Select.
Paul Greco.
Yeah, Paul Greco. I think that Lauren and Emma were all at...
in New York?
Not the Spotted Pig, they were
the
all
Breslin or something.
They had some New York restaurant connections.
So it's got a good hybrid.
It's got that sort of a New York sensibility.
Is there food there?
The food is fantastic.
It is.
Food is fantastic.
So it's just a good all around
bottle
place.
shop, great wine list. It goes some natural, but a lot of they're the first question that they ask a supplier is what's the farming like.
Right, that's important to them.
That matters so much.
All right, those are good ones. Like I said, I'll post them. All right, fourth question, favorite all-time wine. When I initially structured this question, I brought people in where I wanted to know what their most expensive and rare wine they ever tasted. I can give a crap about that. I've said this 200 times. I want to know about the wine that was either a gateway, life-changing, changed the way you thought about it, still important to you. Could be one, could be two.
Yeah.
Do you have a wine like that you could cite?
There's two that come to mind immediately. And for me, it's wines that when you get down to the last sip in your glass, you don't want to drink it because you want to have something there to keep smelling. And the first one that was really hit home for me was 1997 Sangiovese that my uncle made from Cayman's property.
Really?
And it was
97 was a good year.
97 was a great year in
California.
California. Transcendent bottle of wine.
And were the grapes they weren't that young or anything?
They were, and that was, that vineyard had probably been planted 4 or 5 years earlier.
Okay.
It was young vines. It was when we were all chasing Sangiovese as sort of the next Cabernet in Sonoma, and it never really took off. Since been cut over to Grenache actually. But that's one that I was oh yeah, there's something here. The other one that I think of all the time when I think of my favorite wine moment, 2010 Arajo Syrah.
So 10 was another great vineyard. Arajo was a great maker, a luxury maker.
Totally.
But Syrah was not their big wheelhouse.
Think of.
So you probably spent a lot of time, in the vines, and I don't think I've had it. I'd like to.
I've since found a couple and stuck them in my cellar. Hopefully,
I'm sure you can find them for $400 or $500 a bottle.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah. No
it
problem.
wasn't quite that bad. But
All right,
now that
last question, and then we're going to taste the wine, and then I got to get you out of here. So you should be able to do this, and it could be your wines or anyone else's, any region. I'm looking for you to recommend the best wine around $15-20, 22 bucks. I'm looking for a red Recco. I'm looking for a white Recco. My kids are in their mid-late 20s, 30s. They can't afford $50-60 bottle of wines. They're not bringing $11 crap supermarket wine that we talked about. What's that wine that was? And you could go category. Like I think Muscadet for the money
Totally.
is killer. Well, what? Give me a kind of Recco or two.
white wine at that price point, I'd probably be finding like a bottle of Vinho Verde.
Okay.
Something from Portugal.
Okay, I think that's a great Recco.
Spanish, or,
I think the
Spanish
values
white
are
wine.
there, and they're making good
Totally.
money.
For red wine, the self plug, and I know Jake's in the other room listening to this. This is good for Field Blend also. We make a Sonoma Valley Zinfandel. It's one of the few non-vineyard designated.
In that
in
22 buck range?
I think
That-
it
I was
lands
hoping maybe you had a wine.
in the low 20s, 25 bucks
I
a
would-
bottle.
that's great.
If it's
Wait,
not
so give me the exact. So it's the 16600 Zinfandel,
Sonoma Valley Zinfandel.
Sonoma Valley, and it's labeled Sonoma.
labeled Sonoma
and there are
Valley.
other Zinfandels
that
with
have the estate,
designates.
the other vineyard
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
designates. This is
Okay.
kind
So
of
like
a
I said,
catch-all.
we'll post that. All right, good job on that. Like I said, I'll post that. It'll be in our social media. All right, so every week we taste a different wine on air. When I have a winemaker, why wouldn't I sit here and taste his wines? That's why I asked you and Jake to bring a wine. So we are tasting the 16600 2018 Dos Limon Syrah, very important emotional vineyard. To the family on Sonoma Mountain. All right, so tell me a little about this wine. Let's talk about, we talked about the vineyard, talk to me about the vintage, talk to me about anything else.
2018, great year. Largest crop in the history of the state of California. No climactic calamity at all.
Drama.
No drama. No heat spikes, no rain, no fire. So it was just a great year. Late year. We picked things late in 2018. It took a long time to get right.
Even with all the climate change BS.
It was just,
it's funny, yeah.
What I love about this wine is a few things. Starting in the 2015 vintage, and this came to me as an idea from another winemaker. We make a little Viognier. It comes from the Steel Plow Vineyard. When we press the Viognier, we fill up painter's buckets, 5-gallon painter's buckets, usually 8 to 10 of them, with the skins from the Viognier. I take them to a big giant walk-in freezer and put them in there and wait for the Syrah to come in. Usually 2-3 weeks later, we'll go pick the Syrah. I'll go take those skins out of the freezer and add them to the must right at the beginning of
Really?
fermentation. And so
That's
it's a little
interesting.
nod to Cote Roti, but in California, we don't need the sugar from the Viognier
No.
to help. We just need aromatics
Right.
and textural
Viognier
elements.
is great aromatic.
And sort of, for me, just kind of like finishes the wine. This Syrah can be a little rough around the edges. Sometimes kind of polishes some of those edges. This wine ages super, super well.
Well, it's already got 4 years of bottle age, which takes a little of the edges off. All right, so we do a little evaluation. So let's talk color.
Yeah.
Pretty deep dark edges,
For
right?
sure.
A
And-
good Syrah.
Yeah, and counterintuitively, adding the white grapes to this
Right.
actually helps set that color a little better.
Yeah,
too.
which is crazy. All right, get it up into the schnoz and I suck at nose descriptors. Tell me what
Yeah.
you get on the nose on this particular wine. There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot going on. There's some. It's not bacon, but it's just like the bacon fat,
Which is classic,
classic Syrah.
It's not overwhelming.
It's not, but it's not.
I get in a good way a little vegetal.
Yeah, there's a little like.
Right away, I got that, and
sort
I
of
love that unless it's done
floral,
wrong.
It's not. Again, it's 2018, so maybe it could have gotten riper, but we just had to pull it. But I don't think it's not green vegetal.
No,
it's
no,
it's
no,
like
no.
floral
There's-
herbal vegetal.
Yeah, there's a nice touch to that.
a
It's
little,
hard
like-
not to notice, but it's not negative. All right, let's go
Yeah.
mouthfeel. It's mouth filling, and then I want you to tell me it's mouth filling. It's not unctuous
Right.
or glycerin-y, but it's, I'd say medium plus,
Medium plus.
but not overbearing.
I want to feel a wine from the front of the palate to the back of the palate. I don't like when there's
So
holes.
let's go palate.
Yeah.
So before we talk about how it feels, does the palate mirror what you get on the nose? A little of that bacon fat. You get anything else? Give me some descriptors on the palate.
It's pretty dark.
I was going to say dark fruit.
Dark fruit, like past blue to black fruit. A little blackberry kind of experience. There's definitely a good, it's not peppery, but it's sort of like
Spicy.
a little spice to it. A
Yeah,
little,
it's not
like, sort of
peppery.
essence of it.
We would have said pepper early
It's
on,
not, it
but,
doesn't
but there's
it's
a
not,
spice
like,
in there.
hit you over the head with those pepper kind of notes, but there's just enough sort of like something to kind of make you sit up and take a little notice.
So I think on the palate, it's you get that initial attack, the mid palate is there, and then I think when you pull the glass away,
Right.
it opens up nicely in the mouth.
And it opens. This is the thing that
I mean, I'm still,
right, and it opens up as opposed to down. And I think that like at the back of the palate to sort of lift up and expand as opposed to fall down is so important to us.
what's a great wine pairing for this? There's two things. There's
Yeah.
what goes with Syrah, there's
Right.
what goes with this wine, what goes with this vintage, and what you think.
Can I just kind of like lean in on, everybody wants to talk lamb and Syrah, but I think with this wine not being as sort of like over the top as some Syrahs can be, you want to keep it a little lighter than that. To maybe like some duck breast or something like that.
I think it would go great with
Yeah.
duck, but I think it would be awesome with a juicy burger dripping
Totally.
down. I
That's
think
great.
with
That's a
like
great call.
fatty skirt steak, which is very in your face,
Yeah.
which other wines could handle. This would be great with it.
Yeah.
I think in that zone,
Totally.
there's a good width and all of that. All right, so that's the 2018 Dos Limones Syrah from Winery 16600. Sam, we got to wrap up. I told you this would go quickly. We've been doing it an hour and 10. I want to thank our guest, Sam Coturri. Sam Coturri is the proprietor at 16600, Winery 16600, out in Moon Mountain in Sonoma. Best place to get info? Online?
Yeah, we actually just launched a brand new website, winery16600.com.
So WINERY.
Yeah, winery.
SIX
16 the word, 600.
600.
Yeah.
And
Social media is great.
If we want to follow you on social
Yeah.
media, you, the winery, the
Right.
podcast, give me some handles.
16600 is the winery on Instagram and Twitter. Grapes with a View is my
All right,
personal Instagram.
So Sam's personal is Grapes
Yeah.
with a View.
And that one I'm probably more active on than the other one. And then Winemakers Pod.
It's under Winemakers.
Is the both on Twitter and Instagram.
Okay, so and I'll post that stuff too. And lastly, because
And wherever, and if you're in New York, wherever Field Blend is selling the wine is a
Right.
good place to find information about it.
right, and for somebody who's been to over 100 Dead concerts,
Okay.
let's talk about the label. Who designed the label?
Yeah, we forgot about that whole part. So our label is designed by an artist named Stanley Mouse.
Say no more to people who
Yeah,
know.
if you know, you know.
No,
And if
right.
you don't know,
He's-
you actually do know
He's
because
a cultural artist
Yeah,
of his time.
the things that, if you close your eyes and picture a poster from San Francisco in the 60s, what you see Stanley Mouse made. Skull and Roses, every Journey album
That
cover.
Skull and Rose gatefold album is
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
Yeah, and then it became a great T-shirt and all that.
the whole deal. So
Fillmore West posters, all kinds of crap.
everything. Steve Miller Band with the
Right.
flying, the Pegasus, the whole thing. And I grew up with his kids in Sonoma, and when we needed a label, he said, "Stanley, what do you got?" And we expected we'd get something wild and psychedelic, and he had just done this oil portrait of a pensive
I know
woman
that's
drinking a
kind of
glass of wine.
controversial.
For
Stanley Mouse.
So his first of all range of just in styles that he can do, but a lot of his contemporary work is these oil-based portraits.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Is he's alive?
He's alive.
How old is he? About 60s? Maybe 70s?
He's going to be 82 or 83 this year.
So he
I
was
think.
an adult when he was hanging with it. He was maybe older than them.
Yeah, totally.
Very cool.
And still going. He has a studio out in Sebastopol.
Is he out?
Great follow on
I got to
Twitter
get out there and
Facebook.
check that out. Maybe you'll have to hook me up with him.
If you come out, we'll go out and see Stanley.
All right, so I want to thank again Sam Coturri. Thank you to all our engineers at Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.